Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. This is Julie Bruns, and you are about to be inspired. I am so excited to share my conversations with amazing people from all walks of life who figured out how to be happy, peaceful, and content doing work they love and making the world a better place so that you can see what's possible for your life. I can't wait to hear what you think. Send me an email and let me know one thing you're taking away from this episode. And never forget, anything really is possible. All right, welcome everyone. My guest this week is Gretchen Carlson, and some of you may know her name, some of you may not. So I'll just say that Gretchen has had a long career in news and broadcasting. And I first came upon her work, and I'm only going to say that I'm not watching the news simply because that's just not my thing. I don't focus on that stuff. And I try so I can stay positive and make a difference in the way I am. But I learned of your work through some movies that I saw and some books and articles I read about everything that you went through in your career, Gretchen. And I just want to say that we're talking today because I reached out to you and I admire your work. I admire what you're doing. I admire your bravery a lot. And I have always admired people that are stepping out and saying, like, pay attention, everyone, this isn't right. And then doing something about it instead of just complaining about it, which is a lot of the news. Obviously, we see, people just complain about it and then they move on to something else instead of saying like, well, let's do something about it and let's make it better so that other people don't experience the same thing. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you so much. And if people don't know my story, on July 6th, 2016, so almost 6 years ago now, I found the courage somehow to step up to the plate and sue my very powerful boss at Fox News, Roger Ailes, who was the CEO and chairman at the time, for sexual harassment. And, it was the biggest decision of my life and not one that I took lightly and not one that I decided the night before. It took an immense amount of courage to do that. But, of course, I had no idea how it was going to turn out. And the idea that I somehow helped to ignite a movement that we now live in is almost surreal to me on a daily basis, because I thought I was just going to be sitting at home crying every day because I had lost my 30-year career in journalism. And instead, I think it turned out as best as possible in the sense that I've ended up helping so many other people and, was just able to pass a huge law on Capitol Hill to make workplaces safer as a result. So your opening statement was so correct that I grew up, really knowing that I had to work hard to achieve anything in life, but also that it was really important to give back. And that's how I've seen my last 5.5, 6 years. I'm giving back to all the women who never had a voice.
I love that. And I've always been, I'm getting chills thinking about it now, because I just remember even being in grade school and kids getting made fun of and thinking like, I wasn't getting made fun of, but anyone around me that I was always like, they need protection. I need to speak up for them. They're not going to do it themselves. They're getting bullied, whatever it was. I always had that. I don't know where that came from with me. I grew up in a big family, but I was always like, they need protection or they need someone to say something. I'm safe because no one's doing it to me, so I can do it for them.
Yes.
And it's so important because it's not it's never an easy thing to stand up and say what's right and to do the right thing. Of course, it's easier to stay quiet and then just go on your own merry way and never say anything. But then nothing's ever going to change if everyone decided to do that. Nothing would ever change. People could just get away with the bad things they're doing, continue to do them, and then there's more people like you, like me, like all of these people I was talking about. It ends up just perpetuating and nothing
100%.
ever gets changed.
That's exactly what I found out. I mean, after my story hit the news waves, I realized then that sexual harassment was a pervasive epidemic in our workplaces. I didn't even realize that before I filed my suit. And I think a lot of people listening thought we had solved that. But then I also came to realize that something else that was a pervasive epidemic was the silencing mechanisms that companies have used to make us feel like this has gone away. And it's not just sexual harassment and assault in the workplace, it's discrimination of any kind. A lot of these human rights violations, as I like to call them, have been pushed under the rug. And the way in which companies got very smart in doing that was in putting these certain clauses in your employment contracts that precludes you from having a voice. And most people have no clue they're even signing these when they start a new job. And they certainly don't expect to have anything bad happen to them.
Right.
So even if they were aware of what these clauses meant, like when they put one of these clauses in my last contract at Fox, a forced arbitration clause, which I hope we'll get into explaining, I was, very smart and paid attention to every word. And I asked about it, like, what is this? And the only response I got was that, oh, every company's doing this now, so don't worry about it. I was already thinking about my lawsuit, but I did not have any idea that this clause was going to preclude me from making it public. So what it meant was that if I wanted to file a complaint, I had to go to this secret chamber of arbitration instead of my Seventh Amendment right to make my case public and have a jury hear it. People have no clue they're signing these things, right? And so that was a dark day for me, one of my darkest in my life, when my lawyers told me, you have no case because you signed this contract. And even though you're a smart person and you've been doing TV work for 30 plus years, you're screwed. And that's when I realized, that's really why we sued Roger Ailes personally, which is a whole nother story. We were trying to circumvent the arbitration clause, which is the only way that my case became public. But that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I have to help all these other people who have been silenced through these mechanisms that nobody understands. Nobody.
And it's not an accident that they don't understand them. They put the jargon so that you can be confused about it. Or like you said, a smart person says, well, hang on a second, this doesn't sound right. Oh yeah, everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing it. And so someone behind the scenes said, we're going to trick them. We're going to write it this way. They're not going to ask the right questions. And we're going to get away with it. It's like, it's what I think the craziest thing is that that's someone's job.
Yeah.
There was a lawyer, there was someone in that legal office that said, we're going to write it this way so you can catch, trick, whatever the people, and then do harm to them. And they won't ever be able to come back and say, I'm sorry, this isn't okay. Like this is
it's unbelievable.
Insanity. It's insanity.
But you know what? I can point back to what my theory is about how this started in the workplace, because it was actually the first story I covered as a journalist when I was a young cub reporter. And my first job was in Richmond, Virginia. It was 1991, and that was when the Anita Hill hearings happened on Capitol Hill, where she brought forth claims of sexual harassment against, then almost Justice Clarence Thomas. And that was really the first really public international discussion about sexual harassment. So while companies knew that they had to maybe contend with this now and come up with sexual harassment training, my theory is that they also said to themselves, we got to figure out how to never have an Anita Hill at our company. And so arbitration clauses in employment contracts in 1991, only 2% of all employees were bound by them. By 2024, 84% of American workers will be bound by secret forced arbitration unless I stop them. So that just goes to show you exponentially how it became this own epidemic, because companies saw Anita Hill and they were like, crap, we can't have that here.
No.
We got to figure out a way to protect the company. And it's kind of backwards because, instead of the movements that we're in right now, which I believe are not going to go away, and rightfully so, companies and people spend so much time trying to figure out how to cover up things. It's always the cover up that kills you, right? Instead of just being a much more open, transparent employer. And yeah, you're going to have some mistakes and you're going to have some bad apples. But guess what? You should be getting rid of the bad apples, not silencing the people who have the courage to come forward. And that's where we've come to in 2022. And that's the system I'm trying to change.
That was when you were saying that, when they said, oh, we've got to figure out how we never have another Anita Hill. How about figuring out how never to hire a guy that's going to do that to a woman, or a woman that's going to do that to a guy, or whatever it is? How about figuring out how to do better background checks so you don't have crazy people like that working for you? But of course not, because that's too proactive. That would,
Well, and it's not even background checks, because how often have we seen people who came into our living rooms every day on television, like Matt Lauer and Charlie Rose and a slew of other people who were national icons for, seeing them every day on TV. You many times don't have the understanding of what the person does behind closed doors.
Right.
And that's what makes this issue, tough. You're like, well, that I can't see that person doing that. Well, but you don't see them 24/7.
Of course.
And so that's the other issue is there really isn't a background check unless you've been a sexual offender and unless you've been fired from a previous job that for sexual harassment. It just happens. And what ends up happening in the workplace is that unfortunately those people are protected. And so they get to keep their jobs through these silencing mechanisms and the processes of this. But it's the person who has the courage to come forward that gets pushed out. That's how crazy this is.
It is crazy.
And there's millions of us out there who have been forced out. And I'll just add this, that it's the people we're forcing out are the exact people that companies actually say they want to retain, women and people of color.
Right.
And every study shows that they increase your bottom line. So even from a financial point of view, if it was nothing else, you would want to be able to protect these people and keep them, especially now in an employee market. So, my work has really gained steam over the last couple of years because of COVID and because of employees having much more say in where they want to work and how they want to work. And now it's picking up steam that employees don't want to work at places where you silence people. So, it's sort of been the perfect storm for my work. And it's one of the reasons I think that my bill actually passed in a bipartisan way as a result of this movement continuing and employees having more of a voice.
I love it. I'm so grateful you're doing it. I'll just add my little 2 cents of like, I didn't know it was sexual harassment, but this happened to me in high school by one teacher. And I knew it wasn't right, but I also didn't know that I had the right to go and tell someone. Number one, I didn't think I was going to be believed. Number two, they would have, in my head, they're just going to brush it off like, oh, he just said this, and it doesn't mean that, you took it the wrong way, you're being too sensitive, whatever. And I remember telling my friend, like, I need to get a tape recorder because no one's going to believe me. I'm going to tell someone. I was 16. No one's going to believe me. It happened in front of a classroom full of people. It wasn't like it happened on the side either. And I would just remember thinking, no one's going to believe me. I'm going to have to get a tape recorder. And this is the late 80s. So we didn't have iPhones and phones in our classrooms. I would have to bring a tape recorder machine in there. I mean, how am I going to prove this? So it was a really bad experience. It obviously, did a lot of, underlying. I was thinking, I got that, I don't like it, but the feeling lingered on, and then it went into other things and, whatever. But the point was, I didn't think I had the right to say anything. I didn't think I was going to be believed. Who's going to believe this 16-year-old girl against this man who's in his, whatever, he was tenured and probably worked there for 20 years in that high school. And it was just blatant too. And it's like this like cocky, like, I can just say whatever I want. What's someone going to do?
Right.
It
starts at a young age. It
yes.
Really does. One thing I've learned through this whole process is that we really need to get to our boys at a young age because they develop their opinions about girls and they start making fun of them and they get rewarded for that, right? I mean, it's just like boys get rewarded for being brave and taking risks. And as girls, we're socialized to kind of, sit quietly and be peaceful and color inside the lines. And so when we have, ambition and bravery and courage, we're called bossy. Yeah. And boys are applauded, right? So we need to get to them at a young age so that they can learn how important it is to respect girls who then become women, who then become their colleagues in the workplace. It's the biggest lesson that I've learned, and I've seen the transformation. Well, not transformation, but I've seen my courage pass on to my son, and I hope that I've given him the tools to respect women for the rest of his life. Another part of that conversation is just getting to men too. We need men to help us in this fight because most companies are still run by men. Yep. And so we need them to hire us, pay us fairly, not treat us poorly, and look out for us and protect us and not push us out of the workplace when we have the courage to come forward. So those are the two probably biggest lessons that I've learned. And I'm so sorry you experienced that when you were 16, because these are the kinds of things and the shame that accompanies that stays with us for life. Yeah. I've had many other instances in my life before my experience at Fox News where I was assaulted twice in my early 20s. And also after I was Miss America, one of my judges wrote a book and he was famous. And I, was just a 22-year-old girl from a small town in Minnesota And he called me Miss Piggy throughout the book and said I was too fat to have become Miss America. It was the most denigrating, awful thing that somebody would do to a young woman. And by the way, I was 110 pounds, and the thinnest I'll ever be in my life. Like, it was just so, but I understand that shame that we as women carry around with us. So first of all, I just want to let everyone know that we can let it go. And that it's the way you do that is to talk about it openly. I hid all this stuff for 25 years. And it's only through talking about it that we get better and can become fulfilled again as people. But it's also important to educate these people who end up treating us horribly at a young age so that they don't end up doing it.
For sure. When you wanted to become a journalist, and you obviously, so you had a really long career doing this, and then obviously it all shifted when all this happened to you. Obviously, when I'm sure that when that was happening, you weren't thinking, what am I going to do later? You're thinking, I need to get out of this alive and with my head on my shoulders and insane. But did you, along the way, when you were a journalist, did you see yourself like doing that your whole life? Like, did you go to school to do that, and then that's what you wanted to do? And then when it ended, were you like, I can still stay in this realm? Or did you know pretty quickly, like, I need to change something and I'm going to do that? Or was it everyone telling you, like, opening up after it happened, like you were onto something and you can change it?
Yeah, great question. So I always say my life has worked in mysterious ways. I hope I'm an inspiration to women and men who, don't know what they want to do in life if they're younger, or if they've spent time with their kids and they want to get back into doing something and they're confused. I hope that my story helps to inspire them, because I've been all over the place. So I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. I happened to be talented as a musician, and I started playing the violin as a 6-year-old, and it just clicked, and I was practicing 4 hours a day, and it really became my career as a child. And I was performing with symphonies. And so that's what I thought I was going to do with my life. And then I burned out when I was 17 and decided I wanted to focus on academics, and my parents were very upset about that. So my mom got a brochure in the mail about the Miss America system, of all things, and it said 50% of your points were based on talent. And she called me at college. She's like, I found something for you to do. And I was like, what? And she told me about it. I'm like, Mom, no, I've never even thought about this. I was a tomboy, and I happened to play a mean violin, and she convinced me. So then my life went in that direction, and I decided to give it 100%. So then, through the grace of God and luck, I won. But then my life then went again in another direction. I was going to be a lawyer. And then I got sidetracked into television from all the experience of, traveling the country to a different city every day and being on TV and radio a lot. So I decided to give that a chance, knowing that my law school scores were good for 5 years to get into law school if it didn't work out. And then I just started moving around the country in TV. So I started in Richmond, Virginia, and then I went to Cincinnati, and then I went to Cleveland, and then I went to Dallas, and then I came to New York City to work at CBS News, and then eventually I got to Fox News. So that was really my charted career path. But when my sexual harassment stuff started happening, look, that's not like something that you aspire to put on your resume. Like, oh, I want to be the poster child for harassment in the workplace. But because I have worked so hard in my life, when it happened to me, I realized that I had to work hard to make a difference. And that's when I started changing into the advocacy, while still holding on to my journalism chops. So I'm still a journalist. I've done podcasts, I've done documentaries. I'm about to announce another project that will be out in the fall. I'm actually more busy now than I was before I filed my lawsuit, because now I've added, huge amount of advocacy in my nonprofit, Lift Our Voices, to my list of things to do. But I'll just end by saying that a person who knows me really well after my lawsuit said, this is what you were always supposed to be doing, Gretchen. Even though your life has been all over the place, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And at the time, I didn't feel that way because I just hadn't found my way yet, but she's right. She's right that this, I've always been passionate about women's rights. I've always been passionate about people speaking up. I've always been passionate about working hard and owning your own story. And so here I am, now, and life just works in mysterious ways.
For sure. Always. No one's ever talked to over 100 people now on my podcast. No one's ever, maybe 1 or 2 people out of the 115 now have said it was a straight path. Like, I decided I want to do this, and I got my degree, then I became a lawyer. Very few people say that, there's a straight path. That's what I think is the most interesting part of it. And it's also showing everyone that just because you had like you said, you had this talent of, a violinist, it's like that easily could have been your career. But
right.
As with lots of things, if you do too much of it at one time, especially when you're younger, I've heard that before, people will get burnt out. And then it's like, now I don't want to do it at all, instead of the, having more of a balance or whatever. But most people will say, I wanted to combine lots of different things together. I didn't know how to do it because no one else was doing it that way. So I just went to school to be a lawyer. And then that's when I figured out, wait a minute, I don't want to do this every day. I wanted to combine it with this other passion of mine. So that's what's exciting about it, because it's never just like you could say, I want to be a broadcaster or a journalist. So you go to journalism school and then you'll get on TV someday. But that's also not very easy. You don't just like show up for your first job and decide that you want to be an anchor on a news program and now you are. That's not how it works.
Especially in TV. Yeah, because so many people want to do it that first of all, they can pay you nothing at the beginning. And you have to be willing to move all over the place to work your way up. I mean, the model has changed slightly since I got into it, but I've always been grateful that I did it the old fashioned way of moving from city to city to city, because I learned how to do every single job. And I think it made me a better, more humble person, because I appreciated all the efforts and people it takes to put on a broadcast.
Yes.
And, it's every piece. And they always say, be nice to your photographer, because they're the ones that are either going to put you in focus or not. And same with the writers, and same with the teleprompter operators, and same. So, it made me more humble and appreciative of all the pieces of the puzzle that it takes to put a production together. So you're exactly right about that. And I didn't go to journalism school. It just happened to be something that cropped up in my life through other experiences. But I will say that my musical background and the discipline I learned from that has served me well in everything that I've tried to accomplish. And also, performing like that at such a young age gave me the confidence to be in front of people and not be nervous. So it's very similar, like walking out on a stage and performing is very similar to the green light going on the camera, where that doesn't make me nervous. So, some people wouldn't see any similarities between music and TV, but for me, there's tons.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I remember you mentioned the Miss America. I remember reading that somewhere and I forgot about that, but I also think I read about the music part of it too, until you mentioned it, though I forgot about it too. That's so fascinating. It's just so interesting what our lives can become like with all of the other interests. And it's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions I wanted so you can answer them in the order you want. The last couple of ones I want to ask you are, is there anything you wish you'd learned earlier in your career? I have a feeling I know what the answer to that is. What's the greatest gift that you offer the world every day? You have to brag a little bit. And then the last one is, what's one thing you knew that you're going to be taking away from our conversation today? A new insight, a new anything. It doesn't even have to be new, just something you're taking away today. So a lesson learned earlier, your greatest gift, and something from our conversation today.
Yeah, I wish I would have told my 22-year-old self to not hide 2 sexual assaults and just swallow it and cry hysterically by myself after both of those incidents, and just shove down the shame into my body like millions of other women. Hopefully in my life now, I'm inspiring younger women and any age of women and men to speak and to say what happened and to own it and to not be afraid. So, even somebody like me I consider myself to be incredibly strong. I hid those things because I was ashamed of them. And like you did as a 16-year-old, you wondered what you had done wrong to be treated that way. And what I figured out through this whole process is that through talking about it is how we fix it. That's the only way we're going to fix it. And so I just want to encourage everyone to somehow dig deep and find that courage to come forward and tell your stories and own what has happened to you in the past and not be ashamed of it. The second question is that, I have just turned all of this into good. And I mentioned my law that passed. So I worked for 5 years on Capitol Hill to try and make workplaces safer as a result of my sexual harassment in the workplace and these silencing mechanisms. And I won't bore you with the whole story because it's not like it's easy to pass legislation, especially in these hyper-political times. But I got a bill passed that's bipartisan, with Republicans and Democrats coming together. And basically what it does is it does not allow companies to force you into the secret chamber of arbitration anymore. If you're experiencing harassment or assault, you have the option. You have the option to be public about it and go to an open court and an open jury system, or you can still go to the secret chamber of arbitration, although I wouldn't recommend it based on the deck being stacked against you in that process. But this to me is my greatest life achievement other than my 2 children, because I know how many millions of workers this is going to help. And now to answer your third question, conversations like this inspire me to continue moving forward. And I am already striking when the iron's hot now. I'm going to go back and try and get rid of non-disclosure agreements now on Capitol Hill, which is the second way we silence people in the workplace. And so conversations like this keep me moving every single day to know that I have a lot of work left to do. And so through Lift Our Voices, I just would encourage people to go to the website and learn more about my work and join my fight.
How can we support you in that, Gretchen? So we join your fight, and then we support. How do we support you?
Well, I believe that everyone has a stake in this mission, whether, you've had one experience or 100 of them. So, everybody has a stake as far as trying to help us raise the money to do research so that we can go to legislators to prove our story. There's hardly been any research in this at all. So whether it's $1 or $5 or $50 or $250, you can go to liftourvoices.org and you can become a part of our mission and feel like you are a stakeholder in this and that you're making a change. That's the first thing. And then if you want to volunteer your time to help us get the word out about these silencing mechanisms, if you want to connect us to your company because you want to know what your company does. One of the things we want to do is put out a corporate report for every company about whether or not they silence their people, because that's nowhere to be found right now. And we believe it's incredibly important.
So is it the new bill says that companies can't have that arbitration thing that you have to sign that says you can, if something bad happens to you with sexual harassment, you can't tell anyone? That's going to be gone, or that is what's going to be?
That's gone. It went into effect March 3rd. They can no longer do that to you for harassment and assault. If you have one of those clauses in your contract now, you don't have to abide by it. So it's retroactive in that sense, which is great. But it doesn't protect for race discrimination, age discrimination, gender discrimination, LGBTQ plus discrimination. Those are the things now that I need to keep pushing forward to try and change as well, so that we can protect all human rights violations, not just harassment and assault.
Right. Well, I honor your work. I admire you for staying strong and flipping a bad thing around and doing something good about it, which is, I wouldn't say probably the American dream, but anyone that lives in this country and knows the freedom that we have and has been to other countries and knows how silenced lots of other countries or countries in our world are. It's like we have voices, we have rights, we have resources that lots of other people don't have. And just to stay silent, to me, is almost as bad as not knowing it and then not speaking up. Is almost as bad as like doing it, the act itself. Saying that it's, like you're just saying it's okay.
It's so hard to come forward though, and it's such a personal choice for everyone. And people unfortunately are probably still going to be retaliated against if they do come forward, which is, I'm also trying to change the system, right? And the way we do that is changing laws, changing attitudes, educating, and that's my mission now. So my dream for the American dream is that every place of employment will change the way in which they handle these types of things and not punish the person who comes forward, but actually do an investigation and get rid of the bad person and just let the person who had the courage come forward if they were telling the truth to continue working. That's all anyone wants to do. Right. And instead we're doing it completely the opposite now. We're pushing the people out. We're making them pariahs. And so in my huge dream of life, we get to that point where culturally, we do not shame the people who have the courage to come forward.
In that theme, I will say my dream is that we don't have to have these laws because there just aren't people that do it. And I know that's a huge pipe dream, but yeah. So if it's 1 out of 1,000 and that it's one person, like you said, that you can get them out. But just to have to educate people so that they know how bad this is, they would never do it. And the laws are just too not in their favor for them to even think about doing it, even if they want to do it. So that there's no one that needs to report anything.
You're right, but that's why we have stoplights and stop signs too.
Of course, because there's going to be people that don't do
You know,
what they're
we
supposed to do.
gotta just keep people in check. But rest assured, every company right now, after my law passed, they're being introspective and they're having to have a lot of meetings about how they're going to handle this, because now it's the law of the land. So, you know, laws last. That's what I always say. Laws last, and they make change, and they gear behavior, in my mind, in the right direction, at least on this issue.
Thank you. And it's people like you that bring them forward. It's not like someone just has a random idea and then, oh, okay, now we had this new law. I mean, maybe centuries ago it was like that, but I had no idea it would take 5 years for something like this to pass. I'm sure that I don't even want to understand what goes on behind.
You don't want to know. A lot of work. I'll just put it this way. It's very easy to introduce legislation. It's almost impossible to pass it. So it's been a slog and a journey, but we did it, and I just never give up. And like I said, it's my greatest life achievement outside of my children.
Awesome. Thank you for everything you're doing. And I will always be a supporter. So, and I will be shouting from the rooftops to make sure people know about it. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks for being here. Take care. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you loved this episode. Don't forget to like us, subscribe, review, and share it. I hope you were truly inspired. And for a little more inspiration, don't forget to pick up my book, Peace, Possibilities, and Perspective: 8 Secrets to Serenity and Satisfaction in Your Life and Career. I can't wait to get you love in your life.